With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, we haven't been doing this for a minute because I've been busy. This guy's been real busy because Congress has been a hot mess, and then it just kind of stopped, and we'll talk to him about that. He's the head congressional dude for The Independent. I don't know if that's your official job title or not. He's wrote one book. He's writing another book. He sings, he dances, he plays a little guitar from time to time. Eric Garcia, how are you, sir?
Doing all right. How you doing, man?
Well, I just lied. You don't really dance, but we'll get into that some other time.
Yeah.
All right. For the uninitiated, the August recess is probably the closest thing to sacrosanct as Congress gets as far as doing the same thing every year. So using the August recess to duck out of work is not unusual. In fact, it's very common. In fact, they purposely schedule tough legislation up against this recess like they do the CR at the end of the year. They do against the voting deadlines. This is not uncommon. No. Doing it the way they did it this week, that's extremely uncommon. Break it down for the people.
Okay, so for those who don't know, the whole reason that Congress typically breaks for August is because it's too hot to be in Washington in August. And then the other reason is that, you know, it's supposed to be ostensibly what they call the district work month. Where they go back to go to small business events, ice cream socials, parades, all that nonsense, or all that fun stuff. And the point of it was that, and as you said, it's not uncommon for them to force votes on really difficult legislation just to get it passed, just because nobody wants to stay there and get out of there. What is uncommon is that Speaker Johnson basically ground the House Rules Committee to a halt. And the reason for that was that Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, and a lot of the Democrats began to try and force amendments on disclosing files related to Jeffrey Epstein after the Justice Department kind of bungled the response after spending months saying they had files on their desk. So now basically they've been offering amendments. And so what happened is the Rules Committee, per the instruction of the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said no Rules Committee meetings this week until the end of the August recess. And also we're leaving a day early. And the reason for that day early is so important is because, again, our good buddy Thomas Massie, and we can talk about Thomas Massie in a bit, and Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, co-sponsored this thing called a discharge petition. And what happens is that a discharge petition is if you get a majority of the signatures, you can basically force a vote on the floor, and without going through committees or without the permission of the speaker or whatever. And but what needs to happen is it needs to quote unquote ripen for 7 days. So they introduced this 7 legislative business days. So they introduced this thing on Thursday, and basically it's going to be like 5 legislative business days coming today. And since then, and now basically they're cutting out. So this thing is not going to quote unquote ripen until they come back in the September in September.
Yeah, and this is a long recess. Trump's actually spoken that he didn't want him going on the August recess, but he got ignored on that, at least for now. He could conceivably call them back and make Johnson do it. We'll see. But the other part of this is this once again compresses the calendar because, ladies and gentlemen, stop me if you heard this before, we are in the middle of shutdown failure theater. We're just not paying a lot of attention to it yet, but they haven't got the 12 appropriation bills done. They've only got 2. I think it's 2 is cleared markup at this point. The third one was supposed to today, but they left early, so now that's not getting done.
Yes.
This compresses the calendar. Look, we already know where this is going. They're going to do a CR of some shape, form, or fashion. Is it going to be the 1-year CR Harris and them want? I know the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world already said they're not going to do that. Is it going to be a short-term CR to the spring? The Democrats already said they're not going to do that. that's the background to this too, is because whatever the moment issue, the Epstein stuff, all that other stuff, we're going to do shutdown theater. We're going to do a CR of some form or fashion, and then it's midterm season. That's the calendar as far as these people are looking at it.
Correct. I should differentiate. Trump wanted the Senate to not do go to recess so they could vote on nominees. The House doesn't vote to confirm nominees. So one little differentiation there. But you're right. That we're kicking off shutdown failure theater because again the government runs out of money on September 30th. Again, you're seeing that people like Andy Harris and the House Fealty Caucus, as I call them, as my colleague John Bowden calls them, or commonly known as the House Freedom Caucus, are saying they want a 1-year CR. Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of them are going to raise some hell about that. And then the Democrats, they say they want bipartisan collaboration and they're threatening to shoot the hostage, but they're not going to actually shoot the hostage. So this, again, Johnson basically shutting down the House compresses the timeline and makes it even tougher for Tom Cole and all the appropriators to actually do what they're supposed to do. And, Johnson and all of them say that they want to do another reconciliation package. I'm genuinely skeptical that they'll be able to do it. This was so painful. It was so painful to do this. They had to literally pull teeth to get it. They have a vote open for 9 hours. Now they're gonna, you're gonna tell me that they're gonna do it again. I just don't believe it. But I've been wrong before. So yes, this is the background. Is this a shutdown failure theater? And Johnson, grinding the House to a halt, basically, as you said, compresses the timeline.
There is the theory that part of the reason Speaker Johnson went ahead and tapped out and sent everybody home is what you just talked about. Political capital is a real thing in Congress. Now, this Congress is very different because they're doing, let's be honest, Mike Johnson's the Speaker of the House, but this is Trump getting what he wants. And this is a Congress and the GOP side that is completely doing whatever Donald Trump wants. Right. There is the theory that Johnson's smart enough to know, no, we just need a cool off period because he has zero political capital today. In a couple of weeks, he will have that deadline. He'll have the CR deadline. The Trump stuff will cycle to whatever the next couple of cycles of Trump stuff is. They're hoping the Epstein stuff dies down. We'll see if it does or not. There's that prevailing theory among a lot of your congressional reporting colleagues is he just kind of tapped him out and said, let's just reset in a couple of weeks because he's got zero cards to play right now because that political capital is a very real thing. And he just blew through about all of it he had.
Yes, political capital is absolutely real. You have to understand how much political capital Johnson blew through for this. He did a CR. And he had to wrangle all the cats for that. He had to get a budget resolution through. Had to hurt all the cats for that. He had to do the original version of the One Big Beautiful Bill back in May, and that blew through political capital. Then he had to kick it back to the Senate, and then he basically said, "We are not changing a word, not a punctuation in that bill. We're gonna had to push that through." And then on top of that, everybody was so focused on the Epstein stuff, we all forgot that the Genius Act, the stablecoin bill for cryptocurrency, that passed, and they had to keep the rule open for 9 hours. So again, he's burned through so much capital. All these folks are grumpy at each other. And this is Johnson basically saying we need a reset. And he probably would have done this anyway, but sent him back a little bit early just because they were so tired. But grinding the Rules Committee to a halt is a sign, to borrow from Trump. He doesn't have the cards.
Now, that hadn't stopped them before, but there's a couple other things going on right now. Let's just get the big headline out of the way. The Epstein stuff is just getting slathered on everything for the clicks and the views and all that. How much of it is it actually an issue? How much of it is performative? I know the GOP is doing all sorts of distractions now. We're playing all the greatest hits about the Obama and rigging the election and all that. Cut through it for us, though, because the headlines were all, well, they ducked out of town just because of the Epstein stuff. That's part of it. It's not the whole story. Give us the ratio. Cut through the noise. How much is the Epstein stuff flavoring what's going on right now? And how much is something else actually driving some of this?
It is driving a lot of it. Mike Johnson will give a really angry press conference yesterday where he basically said "bless his heart" to Thomas Massey. I'm sure you saw that. That polling shows that people don't think it's one of those really interesting things, because polling shows that most people, it's not the most pressing issue for them. The Epstein thing isn't going to move mountains, but it is something where Trump just has negative approval on, or people just don't trust the Trump administration and how they handle it. And so the Democrats, they see blood. They smell blood in the water, and they're trying to hammer this as much as they can. Given they are Republicans are already unpopular, the OBBBA is incredibly unpopular. Something like 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of it, and so what we're seeing is that Democrats really want to force this issue. Particularly Ro Khanna and the co-signatories of the discharge petition, and even some of the, I guess we could call them the Chaos Caucus in the House with the conservatives. Some of them not necessarily Freedom Caucus, but like adjacent to the Freedom Caucus, want this because they want to blame Pam Bondi. They want to blame a lot of other people, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. So that flavors a lot of it, but also just taking into account the Democrats are just looking for something to hit Trump over the head on, and this is something that is prime real estate. And for the conservatives who are, I guess you could say, most captive to the podcast base, the right-wing media ecosystem, they've got to deliver some kind of goods on this thing as well. So
let's talk about the House Freedom Caucus for just a second. Now, you and me have been on their performative more than substantive train for a long, long time, my friend.
Right.
We have years worth of video on this if you want to go back and watch me and Eric discussing this over the years.
Yes.
Punch Bowl this morning, Jake Sherman and crew, they do a great job if you're not following them. You need to. They actually had a cool breakdown on the HFC just in the last few weeks. Listen to this list, buddy. Clay Higgins got passed over for promotion for the guy that's 7th in seniority. In the insult list in Congression speak, that's right underneath your mama jokes. That's pretty much insult. That's a slap. The procedural vote, we already talked about the 10-hour standoff on that one. This list is amazing of all the fail they've done in the last couple of weeks. They made a lot of noise about stopping the reconciliation. They got basically nothing out of it. They made a lot of noise about the rescission package. They basically got nothing out of it. Your friend and mine, Bethesda Charles, I've been on his team for a couple of weeks because his district was the district in Texas that got flooded. He did good work on that. So let's be fair to people. But he's back in town now, and he's doing his old thing, big speeches and falling in line. Where's the House Freedom Caucus at now? Because here's what happens is they get kind of publicly neutered like they have the last few weeks. But then when we look ahead to what's coming for shutdown failure theater, that's right back in their wheelhouse coming up. And now they're going to act up again. And we start the process all over again of them making a lot of noise, not getting anything done, but they'll get a lot of attention. Where in the lather, rinse, repeat cycle of the raucous caucus are we? Because that feels like where we're at right now.
We're just lathering up. We're just getting in the shower. The thing of it is that, again, is that Johnson, I've posted on this and I've talked about this. I'm really genuinely torn about, is Johnson is Johnson an effective Speaker of the House, or does he just know when to call dad? And my answer that I'm coming to is kind of both, because he kind of broke them. Make no mistake, Johnson also broke their backs when Biden was president, because he basically the kind of equation that he cracked was he would not do anything too extreme, and he would basically work with Hakeem Jeffries to pass something on suspension of the rules. For those who don't know, suspension of the rules where you get 2/3 of the vote. So then that way he basically circumvents the raucous caucus. And then now basically what he's done is he's basically dared the Freedom Caucus, the Chaos Caucus, the Raucous Caucus, the Clown Car Caucus, whatever you want to call them. He's basically dared them to vote against Trump. And so again, what you're going to see with this is that, is the Freedom Caucus actually going to, as I've said multiple times, shoot the hostage? And I have said we've been on record saying this for multiple times. You can only take a hostage so many times and not shoot the hostage before people just decide you're not serious. They need to actually show that they've gotten something substantive with the spending cuts. They didn't get that many spending cuts, as many spending cuts as they wanted with the rescissions package. They didn't get as much as they wanted in OBBBA. They got some executive orders, but not really anything binding. So again, they have to show what they're actually going to get. And this goes to my larger point about the Freedom Caucus. What they've proven time and time again is that they don't actually care about fiscal responsibility or their principles. They care about power. And to your point about Clay Higgins, they haven't been that good at getting power either.
Well, and to be fair, when they get it, they're not showing a way to really weld it, because one of the things is if you get it and you weld power, people that have like goals, they'll go along with a lot of mess because they want the power and the rub off of the power and to be power adjacent. Their problem is the few times that they've actually gotten some power, they don't seem to know what they do with it. The House Freedom Caucus works great in opposition at throwing rocks at the House, but when they get in the House and get rocks thrown at them, they don't seem to know how to handle it. Is that a fair way to lay it out?
That's the fairest way to say it, and it goes to what a friend of mine says, which is that Republicans don't know how to be in the majority, Democrats don't know how to be in the minority. We're still under the fifth party system. I mean, going to our talk about shutdown failure theater, this goes to the flip side of it. One of the reasons why the Democrats just don't want to do a government shutdown is because they like a lot of the programs and they don't want to risk seeing a lot of these programs that they care about would get shut down for a bit, which is why their kind of threats about shutting down the government are kind of empty. But in the same way, the Freedom Caucus, the only real members of the Freedom Caucus who've actually moved up the ranks are Jim Jordan, who's now Judiciary Chairman, Judiciary Committee Chairman. He's not necessarily been the kind of hardcore ideologue and bomb thrower. He kind of had to grow up a little bit and kind of was, you could argue, a little bit of a sellout. And then Bethesda Charles and Ralph Norman on the Rules Committee, and they've consistently folded. So to your point, yeah, they don't know how to do it. And the reason why is because the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, they share the same voters with Trump, and their voters are always going to pick Trump over fiscal responsibility any day of the week.
Yeah, and let's talk about some voters that are picking Trump. Staying with the House, there's a big thing right now about House redistricting, especially in Texas. Okay. Texas kicked it off, and now all the blue state governors that want to run for president are talking about doing it in there, especially California, which they can't legally do it, folks. Ignore it. That ain't happening. Yeah. The Texas one, though, I think everybody's missing the story. There's been some reporting on it, but the overarching narrative is missing it. Is the districts they want to redraw are the ones that went Hispanic voters went for Trump.
Yes.
That's what they're looking. They're actually going to carve up already deep red districts based on those new demographics but now, to be fair, there's data on this, the Rio Grande Valley, Houston, the areas north of that. Like, there's a lot of data that says, yeah, this is a real thing. It's going to
San Antonio.
San Antonio is a great one, a town I know very well. The problem is the data set is all they're turning out for Trump in national elections, and they're still pretty across the board on local, state, those kind of elections. So is there any talk of maybe we're getting over our skis on this a little bit? The Democrats got themselves burned real hard on demographics as destiny, and now there seems to be a strand of the GOP that's fallen right in line with that same theory, like, oh, we'll just redraw for this demographic that went hard for Trump. Trump's not going to be on the ballot going forward. Or is there anybody trying to put the brakes on this thing, or are they just going to go full speed ahead on it?
You know, some folks like Ted Cruz, he spoke at an event a few weeks ago, and he basically just said, be careful, because if you, I mean, the flip side, so for, we talk, I've written a lot about Hispanic voters and Trump and with the Republican Party as a whole. What you're seeing now is Trump is actually reversing those gains with Hispanics right now, not just because of immigration, though that's a big part of it. But Mike Madrid, former Republican strategist, has pointed out that even when he started to break with Hispanics when the tariffs hit, because guess who gets most of their paycheck eaten up? It's working class voters, and Hispanics are largely working class voters. So the point is that you don't want to. When you do these kind of mid-decade redistricting things, and remember, this came back and bit Republicans in the tail when they did this mid 2000s when during the Bush era. You want to game these things out for how it's going to look in the future, not based on what it looks like now. So, for example, if you're looking at Henry Cuellar's district, I can understand them wanting to crack his district or pack some more Republicans in there. I get it. But if you want to do long term, if you want to be strategic about this and careful about it, you don't want to do. I mean, they're talking about doing 5 seats because what ultimately happens is that what you need to do to create more competitive districts is you need to get Republicans from safer districts and pack them into more competitive districts, and then that almost makes those safer districts much more competitive. So it really is a game of Russian roulette, and it's banking that this is a permanent realignment. We talked about last decade Democrats were talking about demographics are destiny. They believe that because Obama did so well with Hispanic voters and with young voters and African Americans and Asian Americans that this would be the case forever. Then Trump gave them a wake up call. They could very easily get this wake up call in Texas, particularly with when it comes to immigration, when it comes to tariffs. Remember, a lot of businesses in Texas do business with Mexico. HEB, the biggest grocer in Texas, does 50% of its business is with Mexico. So it's not the smartest thing to base it off of just one year's election.
You wrote about it before, but let's pause for a second, because the way it gets covered. Look, I don't like the gerrymandering stuff because one person's gerrymandering is another person's redistricting. It just depends on which way you're looking at it. Everybody does it. Every state does it.
Yes. Everybody's doing it.
When you're looking at redistricting, because you've covered this for a long time and you've talked about this specifically with the Latino vote, especially, let's back up one more time before we even get into this, because I think this is important. What's happening in Texas, especially in the Southwest and places like the Rio Grande Valley, we're not talking about immigrants, because a lot of people are lumping them up. We're talking about second, third generation, and those are the groups that the voting demographics are changing because they're moving into the middle class. They're moving into the working class. They're working on their children and grandchildren. You're multi-generational now. That's the groups that are changing. So because you wrote about this and covered it so much, just walk people through it for a minute. What we're talking about is there's a huge difference when you have and I'm just picking a number here, use another number if you want. If you have a consistently plus 20R district, that's going to be safe every election unless you have a wave election or a scandal or something else. They can just pencil that one in. If you take a plus 20 district, split it up, and you got 2 plus 11 districts, now you got something you got to worry about. You got something you got to spend money on. And if you have a wave election, you got 2 districts that are very much in danger instead of 1 district that you would have to have something really unusual. When the power brokers are looking at stuff, that's what they're supposed to be looking at. And that's why you're calling it short-sighted. Walk people through that redistricting gerrymander process, because you've covered this for a long time.
Yeah, I covered it a lot when back when North Carolina Republicans started to do their gerrymander. And,
I did that, man. The 8th legislative, we had 3 elections in 14 months. I remember. I was there for it.
Oh yeah, no.
Richard Hudson, God bless him.
I was there, Gandalf. But the Republicans in North Carolina, they finally figured out how to draw a map that just didn't blatantly violate the VRA. But it took them God knows how many tries. And the thing that you always need to take into account with these things, as you said, with a lot of these Hispanic generations, it's important to remember that a lot of our ideas about Hispanic voters are very outdated. People say, "Oh well, Hispanics they're becoming more conservative because they're Catholic and abortion. That's not true. Only 40% of Hispanic voters now are Catholic. A lot of them are becoming either unaffiliated religiously or they're becoming evangelical Christians. A lot of these folks, they work, they're becoming in the middle class, and guess what's the biggest driver of them going to the middle class? It's the oil industry. So they're not too keen on some of the stuff that Democrats are talking about when it comes to renewable energy, even though Texas is one of the biggest states for renewable energy. They are also still one of the biggest groups that does not have a college degree, and that is that's right for the picking. And as you said, as they're becoming second, third, fourth generation, they are just they're becoming more assimilated. And this, we're not even talking about the Tejanos who have been there since Texas was even a state, going back to when Texas was Mexico. And if you ask them, they will say, yo no soy gringo, yo no soy mexicano, yo soy tejano, which is to say, I'm not Mexican, I'm not white, I'm tejano. So they're just becoming more conservative for a lot of other reasons than just Trump. Trump capitalized on it, and he kind of cracked the code. But also, these swings can go back just as quickly. These kind of wild swings, the pendulum can go back as much as it goes the other way. And as you said, when you crack a district, and let's say there's an R+20 district, as you said, and now you put some of those voters into maybe an R+1 or a D+1 or 2 district, you now have, if you're Speaker Johnson, you now have to spend more money on those districts. You have to spend more capital. You have to get more TV ads up. You got to get donors to open up the wallet a little bit more. It's not the smartest thing long term to do unless you are absolutely certain that this is going to work. And again, the generic ballot is showing Republicans are in some deep trouble right now. So I get why they're partially trying to do this. They're trying to shore it up so that they don't lose the majority. But again, what that ultimately does is that a gerrymander today can become a dummymander tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's more than that. Since we're talking about the midterms coming up, keeping one eye on that. My buddy Mark wrote about this with the Rio Grande when it went red, Rio Grande Valley. I mean, this is the disconnect in a congressional when you have national parties trying to do these things, because you just talked about it. The Democratic Party, they get in trouble with this. Is like, well, some of the police stuff, if you start talking about, defund the police and all that. Well, in the Rio Grande Valley, all the cops are Latino.
Yeah, and Border Patrol and ICE.
The Border Patrol is 52% majority Latino for a lot of good reasons that we can figure out on our own. ICE is changing now because, God knows the monstrosity that thing's going to become with the new funding they're getting.
Yes.
But Border Patrol's majority Latino.
Yes.
So if you get somebody from the Northeast that's, higher educated, kind of a traditional, more liberal, progressive mindset, that's a foreign concept to them. They don't understand that, no, everybody down there is Latino. That means the cops are Latino. The local service workers are Latino. It's not just service industries and agriculture. Everybody's Latino.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect. And when we start looking at things like redistricting, which is all about the midterms, these are things the major parties, it's almost like they're behind the times on. And the Republicans got the same problem in the reverse, because now they think Latinos everywhere are going to be like the Texas Latinos, and that's not true either.
No.
So this is the problem they get into with trying to game the system for just the next midterm, and it gets to be short-sighted.
It's incredibly short-sighted, and it's one of those things that, again, as I said, it'll come back and bite them in the worst possible way. Democrats learned this the hard way in 2010 after Obama won. You have to take into account, what does it look like when your superstar candidate is no longer leading the team, your superstar player. You have to think about when Larry Bird is no longer playing on the Celtics, when Kobe is retired from the Lakers. You have to think about these things long term. You have to think about, what does it mean to get the maximum amount of seats long term for us to win. And look, Trump, a big reason for this was because Trump wanted it. Trump basically phoned in and demanded it. But again, just because Trump wants it for his own majority doesn't, Trump is going to dine out on the Texas GOP's credit card, based, so to use a metaphor. And as you said, a lot of these Hispanic voters, they are on edge. They're not fully convinced on the Republican Party. They may have voted for Trump, and that was partially just because they didn't trust the Democrats, but they're not necessarily long-term Hispanic voters, Republican voters. They just don't trust the Democrats. And I think that's the difference. I think a lot of people, I was at Ted Cruz's election party on election night, is that he said that these are Hispanics just being naturally conservative, so they're naturally just going to the Republican Party. That's kind of a misnomer. It's just that they just don't trust the Democratic Party. And also they just remember Trump, the economy under Trump. I remember the chairwoman of the Webb County Democratic Party telling me that people were telling her ahead of 2024 that Trump va a darme dinero, which is Trump is going to give me money, because they remember the stimulus checks. So again, the fact that they said Trump, not the Republican Party, shows that this might be an incredibly short-sighted venture.
Let's talk. We've been beating up on the Republicans. Let's talk about our Team Blue friends for just a second, though, because they've got superstar problems of their own. Because, and let's just be honest, since Obama, they really keep looking for that one person and they can't find them. And they had an interesting thing in Congress this week where mayoral candidate Mamdani came down.
Yes.
And did the tour. And you saw this and you covered it and you talked about it at The Independent. We will link to it. And that's the term you used, yet another superstar candidate. Now, we're getting ahead of ourselves on this because they still got to have an election. And the polling is, he's not blowing them away. He's the front runner. He's the leader, but it's not done by anything. What do you do with something like that? Because I've kind of been the skeptical on one, like he's running against Andrew Cuomo, who's on a power trip that vaguely has ever been seen before in electoral politics. So you got to factor that part of it in. The Adams stuff with Trump, you got to factor that in. There's a lot going on here environmentally. But once again, you have a superstar donor-based internet candidate, and they do the congressional tour. And you see kind of the more sober people, Hakeem Jeffries hedging his bets, a couple of the other people, and they're like, man, I got to do this dance, but I know in my head I got to kind of be careful with this. Has the party just not figured out how to do superstars in the digital age because their donor base and the media folks that they work with are so ingrained on the online stuff? But I think they're starting to learn the lesson that there's a line there somewhere. They just can't find it. Talk about him coming to Congress this week, because I thought it was a fascinating Rorschach test on where the party is heading into this midterm and how they're going to deal, because they're going to have a lot of superstar progressive candidates that are going to get real popular that won't be popular in wide swaths of the country. They got to learn how to handle this.
Great question. And it was funny because like the day that Zohran came to the Hill, I was seeing Jamie Raskin and Pramila Jayapal walk out from votes, and I overheard Jamie Raskin saying, "Did you see Mamdani?" Like, and it was kind of like, teenagers saying, "Did you see the Beatles?" Or modern day for those youngins. Did you see Taylor Swift? But like, I mean, I think it was like he was a superstar for them. But then, folks like Laura Gillen, who represents a district just outside of New York City, out on Long Island, she has to create some distance for herself. Tom Suozzi, who represents part of Queens, but also a large part of Long Island, and his district broke for Donald Trump. He's kind of said, yeah, Mamdani's a warning to us that moderates like myself haven't done a good job of, making the case in the Democratic Party, but also he's just way too extreme for me. And I think that it really is. It was funny because like I talked about this with Liam Kerr over at Welcome Pack, and he was saying that it's really hard because like he admitted, and Liam's a moderator, he's like, Mamdani is cool, and it's hard to distance yourself from cool, especially when young folk like him, especially when Latinos broke for him. If you look at the Latino areas of New York City during the primary, he cleaned house. These are Democrat and Asian Americans. These are demographics that the Democrats have been losing under Trump. So there's a temptation there. But at the same time, look, you got to still be able to win in places like Nebraska's second. You still got to be able to win in Kansas's third district. You still got to be able to hold your seats in North Carolina, like Don Davis's district in the Black Belt of North Carolina. Carolina. And so it's simultaneously, how do you get, I mean, and again, look, for the love of God, it was a primary, it was a ranked choice primary in a municipal election with where you had Andrew Cuomo, who to borrow from our good friend Curtis Lewa, was slapping fannies and killing grannies. I love that so much. And you had Eric Adams, who is I think it's fair to say he's corrupt. Literally, my friends and I had a poll
Just
on when he was my friends and I, we literally had a poll when he was going to get indicted, and I'm surprised it took this long. But so like, I mean, I think it's a mistake to think that he's a superstar just because he won with all these circumstances. Credit to him for taking advantage of those in a way that the other candidates didn't in New York, because it was just such a clown car primary. But still, you have to take those things into account, and you have to take into account the fact that look. Democrats need to hold Senate seats like places in Georgia. They need to flip a Senate seat in North Carolina. We can talk about North Carolina in a bit in our buddy Tom Tillis. And then you also, if you're reaching, you got to kind of hope that you can be competitive enough and get a moderate enough candidate to win in Texas if Ken Paxton wins the nomination. And you also have to take into account, you got to kind of think about beating Susan Collins. To say nothing of Jared Golden winning in Maine's 2nd district, to say nothing about holding Senate seats in New Hampshire and Michigan and Minnesota. So it is a balancing act. And I think the other thing is that, for better or for worse, there has yet to be a very compelling moderate candidate who excites people as much as Zohran or AOC did. There was a great graph that was circulating on social media last week that showed the biggest recipient of donor money on the Republican side was Young Kim, who represents my former congresswoman. I mean, the congresswoman from my home district, California's 40th district. But the biggest fundraisers on the Democratic side are folks like Jasmine Crockett, AOC, and all those other ones. So Republicans, what was the old saying? Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. It's changed a little bit under the Trump era, but when it comes to donor money, Republican donors still fall in line, and Democratic donors still donate with their hearts.
Let's back up for just a second, because I'm just amazed how fast people's memories. Did people already forget the knock down the house incident? And for those of you that were born yesterday and don't remember, Knock Down the House was the documentary. AOC is the famous one that came out of that. That's before she was a congresswoman. She was, and I'm going to read it right from the bio here. It says, a young bartender from the Bronx. That's how she was pitched. A coal miner's daughter in West Virginia, a grieving mother in Nevada. We all know who that one is, buddy. And a registered nurse in Missouri. Build a movement. Well, here's the thing is, we're down the road now. AOC has learned to play the game, and it's not that she's sold out or whatever. Y'all can debate that if you want to. She's smart enough to know, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to get along with Nancy Pelosi, and I'm going to win this seat a couple of times. And the coal miner's daughter in West Virginia, that's Swearinger, she lost 2 straight elections by over 40 points. And AOC is pretty much the only one that's got any real power and political future going right now. We see this cycle over and over again, but we don't remember the recent history of how these things work. Is like, yeah, it gets exciting, but these things have kind of limited shelf lives, and you might get one person out of it. And if they're going to have a long career, they're probably going to moderate at least a little bit enough to play the game. And that's why you got AOC now in position to maybe go for a higher office at some point, and the rest of them have kind of dissipated.
Yeah, I mean, and also take into account that two of the squad members, Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, lost their primaries.
Their primaries. That's the whole key. Not the general election. They lost primaries.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it, you could say it was their stance on Palestine. Well, AOC has basically the same stance on Palestine and Israel. So, like, it was just the fact that, Bowman, he embarrassed himself on multiple occasions. Bush just never went back to the district. She was under federal investigation. So take that into account. And then, say what you will about Rashida Tlaib. I know a lot of people don't like her. A lot of people like her, but she's a former state senator. She knows how to take care of her district. And, your constituency services will get answered if you call Rashida Tlaib's the district office. But the point being is, as you said, doing these kinds of things, doing these kind of primary challenges, especially against entrenched incumbents, they are high risk, high reward. Ruben Gallego got a little bit lucky that Kyrsten Sinema quit the Democratic Party before he announced his candidacy against her for the Senate race in Arizona, and then Sinema just kind of up and retired. And then he was running against Carrie Lake, so take that. And then Ruben's also moved to the center, to your point about being a power broker. That's why he's going to be in Iowa next month, folks. And nobody goes to Iowa on accident. But you're right. I mean, and I think that's one of the things to take into account is that at the end of the day, the Democratic base is still fairly the base of the Democratic Party is still fairly moderate, and especially as if you look at where the early primary voting states are, they're all in the South, and we know that older Black voters were the most consistent Democratic primary voters tend to skew more moderate. And so at the end of the day, you still got to be able to win over those types of voters. And that was the issue that Bernie Sanders had when he lost South Carolina, is he didn't even bother to make the call to Jim Clyburn. And I think that at the end of the day, you still have to take it, like progressives still need to learn how to play by the old rules. And credit to AOC, she's actually moved the needle a little bit. And, I know a lot of people actually weren't happy about her not getting oversight, but she actually won the war because guess what she's on now? She's on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is much more influential and much more powerful. If she plays her cards right, she could either run for Schumer's seat or in 10 years down the road, she could be chairwoman of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Yeah, if I was advising AOC, I would actually tell her to stay in the House for a couple of reasons. One is there's so much churn now. You don't have to wait 15, 20 years to get the committee room. She's in line for them now. And she's not only in line for them, but she has the national following and the fundraising and stuff to actually, how do I say this gently? The way those sorts of things work, she's in a position now, she has enough stroke and background to actually get it done. Is that, I'm just laying it out fairly. Let's be adults here. She had a lot of rep. Now she's got enough heft behind the rep to actually get some stuff done. She really could be the next Pelosi, and I don't mean that she's going to be the Speaker of the House necessarily. I mean as far as an influential liberal figure for the next 20 years. I would actually advise her to do that because the way the House is churning out for the next 10 to 15 years, the way it's looking, she's probably going to be able to be a power broker for the Democratic Party. And you could argue she would have more power in that role than she ever would running for a Senate seat that's going to be really iffy, even in New York State, Yeah. Even in New York State, that's going to be an iffy proposition. I don't think the presidential thing's ever going to happen. If I was advising her, she could be tremendously influential for the next 20 years, right where she's at.
And if you go to the Senate, you're just automatically in the back of the line just by, if you went for Senate, just because of the way the Senate is. If you think the House is hung up on seniority, good God, the Senate is even more hung up on seniority. And to the point, let's just be real. Let's be adults here. The Democratic
Party, she ain't going to be a Joe Manchin. She's not going to be that kind of a Joe Manchin, Christine Sinema. That's not what she's going to be.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to be that, and you're not going to risk the wrath of your own party, you're one of 45 to 50 votes all the time. That's just the reality over there.
Yeah. So, and let's be adults here. The Democratic Party is just older now. So there's going to be a lot of retirements coming in the next few years, either retirements or debts. Let's just be honest, because we're all adults here.
Man, we're having 2 or 3 of those a year, but we'll talk about that some other. You just touched on it, so I want to bring it up. My political background, I come from the land of the Blue Dog Democrats that are now extinct. And by the old Blue Dogs were working class, but decently, a little bit of disposable income, socially conservative, governmental wise, a little more liberal. They liked their welfare programs, but they wanted the government to leave them alone with their guns. That kind of white working class Blue Dog Democrat, that's pretty much extinct now because it all went Trumpian and the rest of them left. The moderating force in the Democratic Party traditionally has been the black vote, which is not that it's not progressive, but it's a little bit more broad than people give it credit for. And that's how you got Joe Biden.
Yes.
The Hispanic vote is starting to fracture into that, but it's a lot more diverse and it's growing a lot faster. So it's not quite as moderating, but it is to some extent compared to the white, well-educated progressive wing of the party, which is sprinting left as fast as they can.
The yuppies.
The yuppie larva, Rush used to call them, which is still a great explainer. Yeah. You just were talking about this on Twitter, and I want to extrapolate it for a second. The highly educated, mostly affluent, let's say middle to upper middle class and up, white women
Yes.
is the demographic that has really moved politically in this country.
Yes.
Those used to be the swing voters. That's who Karl Rove made his money with going after, with college educated suburban white soccer moms.
Yes.
They're trending more progressive now. And you were just talking about this. This is one of those demographic shifts that aren't getting talked about, but the Democratic Party is going heavy on these folks because it fits right into a lot of their, I'll just call it priors for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
It fits right into what they want, but it's a powerful demographic that's also pretty electorally narrow. And you were talking about it, and I want to give you a minute to extrapolate it out because I think it's a really important development.
It is an incredibly important development. To your point, Karl Rove made his money off it. James Carville made his money off it. The whole talk about the soccer mom vote of the 1990s. There's a reason why New Jersey went from being a swing state to a solid blue state in the 1990s. People is because of soccer moms. And suburban educated women. And I think what you're seeing, my roommate Pablo Manriquez, you should be following him, Pablo Reports, he calls it the Olivia Rodrigo and her mom vote. These are, I love Pablo for that. But he was right. We were talking about it in the case of Dobbs, and he was right about that. But the thing to take into account is that these are women with disposable income, college degrees. They are much more likely to delay. The one thing that gets in my craw all the time is, for all the talk that JD Vance makes about childless cat ladies, they are much more likely to get married than women without college degrees. But it's just that they delay getting married and they want to have somebody who's on their level. But even then, they're open to marrying men without degrees. So there are women who are. And as you said, they're much more socially progressive, oftentimes much more progressive on race than even Black people are. And they are much more socially progressive when it comes to abortion rights, LGBTQ rights. A lot of them, I talk about this a lot of time, and there really does need to be some sociological studies about the Sandy Hook effect, which really turned them into some of the biggest voters on when it comes to gun control. The idea that it was not just that gun violence was not just something that happened in the inner cities, but could happen in a lily white area of Connecticut. I think that was really a very catalyzing force for them. And then you've got Dobbs, and then you've got Trump, which just supercharged both these trends. And I think that, as I've said multiple times, it's very powerful, and it'll win them House districts in places like Georgia, places like Arizona. You could argue that Joe Biden won Arizona in 2020 because of these types of voters. You could argue that places like Orange County, which, like, my goodness, I was looking at Orange County during the 2024 election. I was just like, wait, is this the Orange County I grew up with? This is Reagan country. My dad lives in Orange County, for context, folks. And the suburbs of Atlanta and the suburbs of Raleigh. Suburbs of Raleigh are a little interesting. We can go into that. Suburbs of New Jersey. But the difficulty with it is that there is a trade-off, right? Because when you get those districts, those kind of suburban districts, you do ultimately kind of lose some of the working class districts, might be a little more socially conservative, for lack of a better term, might be more supportive of gun rights, but at the same time might be more supportive of labor, and might be more supportive of healthcare benefits, welfare benefits, and unions. So again, it is very much a trade-off, and I think that Democrats need to think about, is this is this trade-off worth it? Because one of the trends that was so interesting to me, and it was the one that I looked at the most, was that, we talk a lot about Latino men and machismo and all that. In the past 12 years, Democrats actually lost more with Latinas than they did with Latino men. And one of the only groups that moved left in 2024 was white women with degrees. So, Democrats need to take into account, but simply, just to be completely blunt, there aren't enough of those voters to win. That's just the God's honest truth. The median voter is no longer a soccer mom. It is a small business owner who is likely Asian American or Latino.
let's talk about one of those median voters that wound up being a U.S. senator real quick. Lisa Murkowski is doing her regret tour the last couple of days. Your friend of mine, she literally did the meme, brother. That photograph was so good. I know you were there when that happened. Yes. But she did it. She's doing, I call it the Murkowski and Collins cycle. They're very concerned and then they're very regretful, but they're going to do what they're told to do, which is amazing. But Murkowski's out there now talking about, she's trying to pitch it. The Alaskan Beacon, that's a state newsroom, full disclosure. I do commentary for the West Virginia outlet of them, but I stand by it. They do great work. They're great state house reporters all across the country. Go find one. Free plug. She's talking about, well, I regret it, but if I didn't do it, we wouldn't have got all the things we got. And Alaska got some pretty sweet carve-outs compared to the rest of the country here. She talked about how the budget for Alaska was saved because there's a lot of state budgets that are going to get wrecked by the big, beautiful cluster FARC. Yeah. Collins is another one. She's trying to decide whether she's going to run or not. We'll see what happens there. Rand Paul took out a op-ed in I think the Courier in Louisville and did his I hate this thing gadfly thing that Rand Paul does. We're seeing the walk back already start, especially with these more moderate and senators like Rand Paul, who's got nothing to worry about. You mentioned at the beginning, and I never came back to it. Here's a good time to talk about Thomas Macy with the Epstein files on the steps doing his little thing, right? Yes. We're starting to see the strategery now from these folks on the Republican side who all fell in line, but now they're trying to lay out their markers for the forthcoming future on it. You saw it in the hallways before they got in front of the cameras, before they went to the steps, before they went to the op-eds. Who should we be watching? Who should we be listening to? Because, look, the Macy Trump thing is good for both of them, so they're going to fight on that. That's going to be the Maginot line for the next 17 months until we get to the election, whatever it is, because it benefits both of them. So they're going to be fine with that. Murkowski's not going anywhere, but she got hurt on this, and you can tell by the way she went. Collins is in, FU territory as far as political and money, so she can take it or leave it, whether she runs or not, but it'll be interesting. Again, you saw this in the hallways before they got in front of the cameras. How much of this triangulating is going to come out of this Republican side in the next couple of weeks? Because now they're all home doing, and the thing about this Murkowski thing, this is local. They're doing local media while they're all on break. Yes. The House is doing local media while they're home. And the local media tunes are going to be a different song than what they were singing 2 weeks ago when they had to vote on this thing.
Absolutely. You're going to be. I mean, the one that I'm going to be looking at is Representative David Valadao, something like who represents California's 22nd district. It broke for Trump by I think 1 point, and but it's a very, very poor district and majority Latino. And again, I said 64% of its population is on Medicaid, according to KFF. And that is going to be, so how they sell that, particularly, how they say, is it going to be, you're not going to lose your Medicaid because of the work requirements, even though we know that work requirements means more paperwork for folks. Also we're talking about the SNAP provisions. I'll give you a perfect example. I was talking with Representative Nancy Mace, one of the somebody who loves the cameras. Everybody, let's be real. Let's talk about it. And I was talking with her about she wants to run for governor, and I said, look, your state has a large SNAP error rate, and for those who don't know the bill, if states have a large error rate for payouts for SNAP, they have to shoulder the cost of it under the stipulations of the bill. And she says, if you're able-bodied and you're on Medicaid, get an effing job. Though she didn't say effing, folks. But how she sells this is she wants to run for governor in a state where there's a lot of people on Medicaid and a lot of people on SNAP is going to be very interesting. The way that people, even just yesterday before Mike Johnson gave his little tirade about Epstein, he and Tom Emmer and Lisa McClain and Steve Scalise were all talking about trying to counteract all the negative information about the OBBBA. And Tom Emmer was saying, despite what local media is saying, the ICE raids are working and things like that. How they message this, how they sell this is going to be interesting as all get out. Brian Fitzpatrick can go back to his district, which is, he wanted a district that voted for Kamala Harris, and he can say, hey, I voted against this piece of garbage, and he'll still probably win by 10 points. But again, how they sell it is going to be super interesting. And typically these things work because, again, Andrew, talking about cycles, typically after the August recess is when you see a lot of folks announce their retirement. And I think that's what you're going to see this go around. Is there are going to be people who come back from their football games and cookouts and parades and small business meetings, and they're just going to say, you know what, I'm out. It's not worth it. So I think that's when you're going to see you're going to see a handful of retirements. And again, the real tell of the wave year is if you see like just a bunch of top ranking Republicans retire.
Yeah, if you see people that's got committee assignments, people with chairmanships, that's kind of the thing. There's always a churn in the House. But if you see people with actual stroke going, no, I'm done and walking away, that's kind of the difference thing. It just, if somebody's been in for a term or two and never really done anything, you start seeing appropriators step off, things like that.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
Yes, no, yeah, exactly. If you're somebody on Ways and Means, if you're on Energy and Commerce, if you're an appropriator, my God, and you say, you know what, I'm out. That's a sign that they went back to the district and they're seeing the bad news.
Yeah, one more political thing that I want to talk about, Ozzy, for a minute before I gotta let you go. JD Vance has been a little bit more in the news. Of course, he's doing tiebreaker votes and that sort of thing. That's his job. Vice president breaks votes. If you don't like it, go elect more people. There was a big brouhaha about him running up to Montana and having a sit down with Lackland and the Murdochs. Yes. The thing that got missed in all that, though, is this is not an unusual occurrence. It's a little unusual for them to do it there, but they're having that big meeting in Montana. It just happened to be where they are. Vance and the Murdochs and the tech bros, the new wing of MAGA is what I've been calling them. That's opposed to the Bannon wing, which is a little bit out of favor right now, but he's trying really hard to get back in, kind of the original MAGA folks, right?
Yeah.
The new MAGA wing is trying to consolidate behind Vance right now. And you got to see it a little bit because when Vance is coming to the Hill now, it's a little bit different. Yes. And you saw him do the walkarounds and you saw the way he's coming and going during the Hill during this, let's say the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially. Give people a little bit, don't give all your good stuff away because they pay you to write and talk on TV, but exactly. Give people a little bit of insight that there's a shift here and the way JD Vance is acting towards his former colleagues, that there's stuff going on there that needs to be paid attention to.
He is, for lack of a better term, much more deferential than he was. I think it's important to remember that when JD Vance...
He's being nice. I don't like JD Vance. He's a jackass.
Yes.
But he is being he's on his best behaviors the way it got explained to me from a source. He's like, man, it's like a whole different guy walking around Congress last couple of weeks. Is that a fair way to say it? Can I just lay that on the table?
It is. When he was a senator, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He irritated a lot of people. Now, look, he still has his Twitter persona where he fights with random accounts with 30 followers. He still does that stuff. But as far as in the halls of power, he's no longer being, your words, not mine, a jackass to John Cornyn, or he worked for Cornyn in the bed, or Jonathan, or Mitch McConnell, or any of that, or Lisa McCaskill, or even Susan Collins. One of the interesting things to me that really stood out to me, and somebody else pointed this out to me, one of my Republican sources told me, is like, notice that Trump isn't going hard against Susan Collins for voting against the One Big Beautiful Bill. That's because he recognizes that he needs to win in Maine. She needs to win in Maine. So she's given a little bit of grace. And, I think that him going nuclear on Tom Tillis, he recognized that was kind of a blunderbuss, that kind of an Elmer Fudd thing where, Bugs Bunny would put the fingers in the blunderbuss and it blew up in his face. That was basically what happened in North Carolina. And I think that what you're seeing with JD Vance is that he recognizes that he can't be the kind of, trying to be polite, the 4chan, edge post.
He's got to go back to being Yale JD Vance and not right-wing online JD Vance.
Exactly. Yes, he's got
to pull Tiger Mom out to write a sequel and go again. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? He's got to go back to that persona. And
yes.
But that's the thing. He was a moderate when that book came out, and everybody knows I hate the book, so bias on the table. He was doing the think tank circuit in DC. I think you saw him when he did the think tank circuit in DC. Yeah. He was going to, Brookings and AEI and all these things. He was doing the moderate tour. He was a moderate Republican bashing Trump. It's on video, kids. Go look. So I think what we're seeing is he's trying to figure out how to meld them two personalities back together, because he understands, unlike Trump, that if he gets to be president in a couple of years, he has to be able to wield power. And because he actually was in the Senate and has seen it work and has seen it not work, yes. I think he's a smart guy, and I think this is his Clinton triangulation period.
It very much is. And, I think that he recognizes, what was funny was I did a piece last year after Trump named him to be his running mate. I talked with a lot of Democrats. And for those who don't understand, yes, the Senate is very partisan, just like everybody feels, oh, surprise, kids. But the Senate is also still the club of 100, and people don't talk mess about each other. They don't trash each other. But the number of Democrats I talked to who were bitterly disappointed after trying to work with J.D. Vance was across the board. Everybody from Elizabeth Warren to Ron Wyden to Tim Kaine to John Fetterman, everybody.
Cory Booker and him had a thing.
Yeah, he and Cory Booker had a thing. They was just like, no matter how much Democrats tried to work with this guy, because I think they were really interested. They felt, hey, this is a Republican who cares about the white working class. Maybe we could do something, and it just didn't work. Nothing got off the ground. And if you remember when Murkowski and Collins endorsed Nikki Haley, he said something to the effect of, "I've got a long memory, and anybody who tries to stop Trump, I'm going to remember." And now he recognizes, oh, wait, those are the swing votes. I need to be nice to them. And, he spent a lot of time trashing Mitch McConnell, even though
he might want to win South Carolina at some point. I tell that's kind of an important state.
Yes. Mitch McConnell's on his last legs right now, but guess what? That man still has a war chest, and he spent years talking mad about Mitch McConnell, even though Mitch McConnell spent $40 million getting him elected in Ohio. So he recognizes that, wait, I need to be nice to John Thune. I need to be nice to, the appropriators. I need to be nice to your buddy, Shelley Moore Capito. I need to play well with Tom Tillis, even if I don't necessarily like Tom Tillis. So.
All right, buddy, I'm going to talk Ozzy for a minute to round this thing up, but I don't want to talk about it the way a lot of people cover it. My buddy Jay wrote a great piece on ordinary-times.com. I'll link to it because he's a little bit older than me, so he talked about growing old with Ozzy because he's a little older than me. You're a little bit younger than me.
Yes.
So my age group, my, late Gen X, right before the internet, that Ozzy was one of the three pillars that was going to send us to hell, along with MTV and Dungeons and Dragons and Ozzy. Those were the three that everybody said we were going to go to hell.
Yes.
And I just have found it fascinating, and I want to talk about it this way. The cultural touchstones of these things. Snoop hosts the Olympics. We talked about that the last time you were on here. Ozzy was beloved because Ozzy, for all the craziness and all the drugs and all the drinking and snorting lines of ants and peeing on the Alamo and all the insanity of it, and I tweeted this, and I was really shocked that I got any response on this, and people just blew my inbox up on it. He might be the most real rock star we've ever had. He was because it was all unvarnished, just him, and he didn't care, and he laid it all out there. And then you get to watch the reality show, and here's this Prince of Darkness rock god who's completely codependent on his wife to a pathetic level, but it's endearing how bad it is.
Yes.
And there wasn't an ounce of bitterness in that guy anywhere for any reason. He dropped F-bombs all the time, but not a one of them. It reminds me, it's the old Patrick O'Brien, because like unmeant swear words, he was the most relatable rock star of my lifetime for as big as he was. And that's the part I think a lot of people don't get it. I know you were joking about, like, it's Black Sabbath, you get it or you don't. That's the part I think people miss about Ozzy, is like, no, he's so relatable as a human being. Watching him do, and we found out now, it came out the reporting that he stopped taking his meds so he could do the concert, and that's probably what sped this up. He was just the most real guy for somebody that's so over the top, out of this world, unbelievable. He connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, cards on the table, like my dad, and my dad was the one who got me into Ozzy Osbourne. And to your point, like, the fact, my mom, she was one of the people who thought that Ozzy was going to send me to hell. My dad loved Ozzy Osbourne, and I think that in and of itself is so telling, because it was like, when parents, I went to go see, I saw Ozzy Osbourne once, and that was at the Sunset Strip with my cousin David. And my cousin David was the delinquent. We all had that delinquent older cousin who lets you play violent video games, listen to heavy metal music and gangster rap. That was my cousin David. And we went to go see, there was a Sunset Strip Music Festival. You can only see, it only cost $50 to go to the Sunset Strip Music Festival. And then Korn was playing, and then when Korn left, we went to the front, and then Ozzy Osbourne played for 30 minutes. And he was just like, and he just yelled, like, he's like, they say we got a curfew, but we're going to play a little bit longer. And there was this feeling that, to your point, with a lot of heavy metal musicians, there is an act, make no mistake, it was an act, the Count, Prince of Darkness stuff, biting the heads off bats, all that. But there was also the fact that you could tell when you were seeing him play live that he was having the time of his life doing it. That there was no other place he wanted to be except on that stage, giving every single ounce to the fans. And you listen to interviews with him, you listen, you watch the reality show to him, seeing how much it meant to him to know that when people walked away, they could say that was one of the best shows I've ever seen. And it was funny, again, me and my cousin, we go to the front at this show, and I'm just giving a throwback. We go to the front, and then what happens is all of a sudden when they do what Ozzy always does, is he plays like 3 or 4 Black Sabbath songs. He pulls out the fire hose at the beginning of War Pigs, and he sprays my cousin and I. So we're covered in foam. And then my buddy is also there, my buddy Jay, and then he throws a bucket of water. And it was just one of the, and that was one of those things where it was just like, wow, I just went to the Sunset Strip and I saw Ozzy Osbourne. How much more heavy metal could that get? And the thing that I said also is that the point about accessibility is, and one of the things I loved about Black Sabbath, and I think a lot of teenagers loved about Black Sabbath, is that those first few albums, you could if you had like a working knowledge of like 3 or 4 chords, you could teach yourself how to play those Black Sabbath chords, or your guitar teacher, or your bass teacher.
They're Beatles songs.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, Paranoid is a Beatles song with power chords. Go listen to the lyrics. He broke up with his girlfriend. That's the song. It's 2 lines, and his hero was Paul McCartney.
Yes.
Ozzy's, they're Beatles songs. They're 3 chords and a bridge, but they just did the power chords, and Tony Iommi's a genius, and Geezer Butler doesn't get enough credit for those bass lines.
Yeah, or writing.
But that's all it is. They just heavied it up. But it's a classic music modality.
Yes, and I think that was the thing, is that, so like, if you're I remember one time I got a magazine of like how to play all the Black Sabbath songs, and I was staying with my dad over the weekend, and then like I learned how to play Paranoid, and then that opening with that lick, that dun 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 da 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 da, and then I overhear my dad up in his office saying, "Ooh, you're playing that," and that was like, and it was like, oh, that's cool, like that was a universal thing. And I think that, again, to the point was that, like, you could tell he was a fan. You could tell he loved the music. He loved the act. He loved the fact that he got to do this. And in his later years, again, to the point that, like, I think the suburban, the sitcom dad, the reality TV show, we forget now, because, I mean, our president is a former reality television star. But, like, the idea of a rock and roll star opening up his home and opening up his family to you in that way with Ozzy was so unprecedented, almost to the extent that every other celebrity reality show kind of ripped off from the Osbournes, and was not nearly as, because they learned the mistakes, they learned the lessons, they fine-tuned it, they do it with every television show and every formula. Everything else was way too varnished. But, like, he talked about his addiction. He talked about his kids' addiction. He talked about, tattoos and all these other things, and like the dogs and the animals. And it was almost, you realize, oh, this guy isn't, the son of Satan. He's just a bloke from Birmingham who got lucky and, invented this incredible genre of music. And, and he's kind of letting you in. And I think, again, that was the point, is that he was unafraid to show who his fans, who he was, all of it, everyone, every last bit of it. And it kind of, and then you almost kind of, and especially when he would talk about kicking his addictions, dealing with addictions, you almost kind of had to, at the end of the day, respect how open he was about, yeah, I was this guy, and I'm trying hard to be a better person. And I think that was the other part of it, was his willingness to talk about, yeah, this sobriety thing is really hard.
And Bubbles.
Yes,
because
and Bubbles.
he's the one of the greatest reality clips ever. If you've never seen it, go find it, where Sharon's doing the new tours. He's like, I'm Ozzy effing Osbourne. I'm the Prince of effing Darkness. I can't have effing Bubbles.
I can't have Bubbles. It's one of the funniest things. Yes, like go back, go on YouTube, folks. It's on YouTube now. Like, where he's just yelling about Bubbles. So.
And the ongoing war with the cats and dogs. That's the other thing I remember from the show. And remember, kids, this is pre-social media as we know it. This is I think it overlapped the iPhone a little bit, but the way, like, this was not when everybody was putting everything on video. So it was one of the best of the reality shows as we know the genre. I think that's
yeah, it was, again, yeah, a lot of it was schlock. Like, I mean, and again, to the point about, like, Snoop hosting the Olympics, like, he's probably one of the only cultural touchstones, because, like, I remember at one point in 2002, he was invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and George Bush made jokes about it, and it was kind of
he got up on the table.
Yes,
he's like, Ozzy. Bush is like, calm down, Ozzy.
yes, and so, like, it was one of those. It was, I have my thoughts about the Correspondents' Dinner, and I've said them many times. But like, that was almost kind of like where he became like this cultural touchstone. And again, like, yeah, when I went to go see Ozzy in 2009, God, I can't believe it was that long ago. Yeah, you had teenagers in Black Sabbath tees and tattoos and things like that, but you also had dads taking their teenage sons, teenage daughters, and you had parents taking their kids to go see it, and to the point where it was almost like, it wasn't, what are you doing taking your kids to go see Ozzy Osbourne? It's like, oh yeah, parent bonding. You're taking your kids you're now taking your kid to go see Ozzy Osbourne. So yeah, like that was kind of how the shift happened.
Yeah, to quote Jay's piece that he wrote today, and I'll link to that one too. And I'm going to link to your political beats conversation on it. I hate to call it a podcast because they were doing that before people were podcasting, that thing. But the political beats you did on Ozzy was really fun too. So we'll link that. But that's what Jay said. He's like, you got to understand, by the time you get to No More Tears, Ozzy's adult contemporary.
Yes.
And then my Ozzy album, because of my age, was really Osmosis.
Yes.
That's the one that was in my wheelhouse of whatever, teenage age I was. But that was my Ozzy album because that's the age I was when it came out. And the Perry Mason track and all the Zakk Wylde stuff. And if you've never heard the story of Zakk Wylde in the studio with Ozzy, where he threatened everybody, he's like, you're not doing this to the old man. We're going to get some good songs. You're not going to embarrass him. Ozzy was so protected by everybody around him, starting with Sharon and everybody else. And we know the Sharon mess and the Randy Rose, and I don't want to rehash that because who cares now. But his family everybody loved. Like, if you go watch the Birmingham concert from 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Like, everybody loved him. And everybody worked with him because everybody's like, oh, yeah, he'd take us on tour and then hang out with us for an hour and tell us how to do shows.
Yes. Yeah, there's a great story when James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich inducted Black Sabbath in the Hall of Fame, where Metallica would, during their sound checks, they would play Black Sabbath songs, and they were opening for Ozzy. And this is like Pink Metallica, Master of Puppets, they were opening for Ozzy Osbourne, and they just so desperately wanted Ozzy to come on stage with them to play Sabbath songs.
Yeah, they were baiting him.
Yeah, they were baiting him. And he thought initially they were making fun of him. And then later he realized, oh, this is what they wanted to do. And like they had to Sharon had put him on a really strict regimen, like where he couldn't drink, and then he would go drink with the Metallica guys. So it was again, that was kind of the fun thing, is that you realize, oh, he was, and I see this as in the highest compliment is that he was, in every sense of the word, a bloke from Birmingham. And you got the feeling that had he not met Iommi and Butler and Bill Ward, he would have easily been another guy at the corner end of the pub, with his name scrawled on his knuckles, telling you stories. And that was almost kind of the appeal, because like, and I said this on social media, it was like with Robert Plant, Robert Plant was a great singer. Roger Daltrey was like a Greek god in so many ways. The Who was my first concert, just to background. Bon Scott was clever, he was sly, he was all these things. Mick Jagger was sexy as hell. You felt like you could be in a band without, like, if that guy could do it and he could write such great songs, he could be, you felt like, okay, I can go with my mates and form a band and become the biggest thing in the world, So, in many ways, it's not a coincidence that he was so close with Lemmy, because Lemmy wasn't the greatest quote unquote vocalist, but he was friggin' Lemmy Kilmister. So, and it was the same deal with Ozzy.
Yeah. And if you've never read the story of how Black Sabbath got, Tony Iommi was Ozzy's bully in school.
Yes.
And then Ozzy ended up, I think he got arrested for burglary or something. And then they all hooked up and they're like, well, we got to do something different or we're going to be here forever at the corner. And that was kind of the start of it. And then Tony Iommi started doing bands. And then he's like, all right, this isn't working. I'm going to go get Ozzy. And they mended fence. It's just such a wonderful. And then you watch these two old men, and Ozzy with the Parkinson's in the chair. I'm at the age, and with my own medical stuff, anytime somebody guts it out like that, I just admire it. Like, no, we're not going to hide it. We're not going to no, I'm going to strap it up, and it's going to be 40% of what it used to be, but I'm going to do this one more time for you. Yeah. See, now I'm going to get messy just talking about it. But that kind of a human arc for those two guys, and then Tommy's the last guy standing. And he's got to do the eulogy now for Ozzy, and we just saw them, and now we see them as old men. I mean, I'm older than you, and I'm more decrepit than you, so I think about mortality a lot more than you because you're still this superstar guy. But that stuff's meaningful to me, and I think it's important to have it in media because, again, we're in the fakest media era ever, and Ozzy was never fake. Yeah, they edited the reality show, but that was all him, man. He didn't care if you saw the warts. He wanted you to see them.
Yeah, exactly. So many people are carefully curated. So many people, especially with social media now, where you can, literally curate what you want people to see on your Instagram filters or your TikToks or your whatever. The fact that he was willing, as you said, to be in that chair and show who he was and give that just one final performance. I mean, the thing it was so emotional. I mean, I think even for me, it was, and I recognize that like I know this is not going to be what I would have hoped it would be, but or what I remember it being. But the amount of respect that I had that he was willing to buck up and do it one last time and literally empty the tank one last time. I think that shows. And then you looked at the crowd and the audience, you would see the live feeds, and just the amount of
they were there to help. They weren't there for a show. They were there to help.
Yes,
they're exactly. We're going to get you through this. It was beautiful.
Yes, exactly. And seeing literally every heavy metal musician and their mother being there, Tom Morello, Sammy Hagar, Metallica, all of them just being there was beautiful. Was incredible. Judas Priest,
Oh, yeah. Halford's awesome. All right. One last question. I'll let you go because I want you to be able to pitch your other work outside of politics with the autism and stuff. You just talked about it a little bit, disability. I keep my account real. I put it out last week. I can't walk this week. I had to go get on the gabapentin and I had to do all this and I've got the cane and I'm limping around. I'm trying to walk around the house. We keep it real. I wanted to bring this up and it's a little personal, but we're friends. I think we can go there.
We can go there.
When we're talking about things like watching Ozzy like that, it's this fake world with IG. I've interviewed you multiple times over the last 4 or 5 years. I can go on the editing software and I can make you sound like the greatest. You can be Cicero Light in Washington, D.C. I can make you perfectly sound. And I can do the same thing for me. And then I started thinking about, I'm like, if I edit out all his vocal tics and I make it super clean and I take out all the stops and starts and all that, it's auditory clean. But now it's not Eric anymore.
Yeah.
And I stopped cleaning my audio. I don't want perfect audio. I want me audio. Now, if I, cough or the cat runs over my foot or what, I clean that stuff up. But I don't want sanitized. And You're right. You wrote a book on autism. You're writing another book about it right now, especially from the man side of it. That's one thing I thought of. And you're one example. There's other friends I know the same way. And I got to thinking about my mom being a special ed teacher. And that's something she said. She's like, when we do a presentation, it's going to be messy. It's not going to be comfortable for people because it's going to be them, and that's how they do it. And I started thinking about that. Like, when I edit this with you, I'm not going to edit a lot of that stuff out. I'll edit some pauses and stuff because I want it to still be Eric and I still want it to be Andy. And I think that's something that, not to bring up all the Colbert stuff and all that, but like, one of the reasons late night died is because it looks so fake compared to podcasting.
Yeah.
It just looks, because it's sanitized, and it has to be. It's not a I swear to God, it's not a criticism. That if I'm taking that check, I got to do that same way. If I'm doing a morning radio, I don't talk like this, because morning radio, you got to answer to people. I think real is important now. And I think this kind of format with podcasting, where we can be real and people can hear that we ain't perfect all the time, I think that's important. And I think that gives authenticity. And I think that ties into the Ozzy thing. And I think it ties into the late show stuff. I think that stuff's important to talk about. You're writing books about it. I just wanted to give you a second to talk about it, because maybe you ain't as slick as some of your other congressional aides, but you're the guy I go to talk to.
Yeah. I mean, what's the old saying? Wood is made stronger by its knots. You have to, the funniest things, or the stuff that I've noticed gets the most attention, is books, media, writing, whatever, is the stuff that's just real. And I think that, especially now where everything is carefully curated, everything is, sprayed, now, especially with AI, and it's only going to get worse now with AI. People do like authenticity. They do want something that they feel like, oh, that's something that a person made. They put everything in it. It's not perfect. There's those little happy accidents, those little kinks, those little ticks. And I think that from a disability perspective, that's absolutely the case. And I think that from a human perspective, that's absolutely the case, because like, you can't, people can tell when you're curating. People can tell when you're BSing them. And when and in some cases you're lying to them, but they can very easily just, they can very easily gravitate toward authenticity, because they feel like, oh, this person's not perfect, but they're still doing this. I can do that too. And I think that's what people want ultimately. And especially now where everything is so focus grouped and so to the gills, completely just sound tested, A/B tested. Authenticity always wins. Always wins.
Yep. And you're writing a whole book about it, but we'll get to that when you get around to finishing it up, which I know you're working hard on. I kept him longer than I thought. Eric Garcia, independent. Let folks know where they can keep up with all of your stuff like I do. You give tremendous content. You give a lot of yourself. You give a lot of opinion stuff on the background. If you follow him on social media, that'll give you some insight. Let folks know where to keep up with you, buddy.
You follow me on Twitter, X, whatever. Elon must call it Eric M. Garcia.
2-year anniversary, and I'm still calling it Twitter, and I will forever.
I will forever, yes. And then it's like the Sears Tower, but then you can follow me on the same handle on Blue Sky. You can follow me at Eric M. Garcia 14 on Instagram. And you can always follow us at The Independent. You can subscribe to our newsletter, Inside Washington, which gives you all of the best insights into what's going on in our nation's capital. So thank you very much.
Yeah, always a pleasure. We'll do it more often. I'll get back to quit being lazy and get back to work. Eric Garcia, follow his stuff. Know what's going on before it hits the headlines. And sometimes when the headlines are wrong, my friend, you do good work, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.